Hey man, so I started building out this roadmap for you, and I thought, why not just record myself doing it to kind of give you a better understanding for what I'm doing. So I started with your website, Bolt AI, and I saw that you have features listed here and you have use cases listed here, and they are then just on the homepage, right? So you're just scrolling somewhere to a certain anchor. And I think they are probably useful to have as subpages with their own kind of structure. So if we look at something like Veet, which does a good job at it, they have use case pages, and it's not all on the home. People not get lost, right? So if people search for, let's say, what was the use case? Subtitle generator or something, right? They will want to land on this page, and all the other stuff that kind of clutters the rest will just confuse them. So if they would land on this generic page, they're like overwhelmed with like, oh, I can do all these things, but maybe I only want to have subtitles, right? And maybe over time they'll dig into the tool, they'll start exploring it more. But in the beginning, that can be a bit overwhelming. And the use cases, content and marketing and developers are very different. There most likely is not a lot of overlap for everyone. I guess it's not really targeted at all. I get that it's kind of like a catch-all bucket, so it kind of makes sense, but you live in their own kind of environment. And what we'll do for that is we'll set up seeds here or site topics, which means we want to kind of create an ecosystem around ChatGPT, for example, or ChatGPT for Mac, which is like your main kind of homepage value prop, right? And then I played around and just threw in ChatGPT 4, which gives us a kind of suggestion for what people are searching for. So we can see that there's ChatGPT for resumes, which is actually, I checked your authority, I think it was a 51 or something, which means it's not doing that bad, right? In terms of DR, which is kind of your backlink strength. So, we can see that you have actually 11,000 backlinks. So that's not bad. But what I've seen is that it's a very competitive space, right? If you go in and you just look for ChatGPT for Mac, for example, that will be an 81 on average as the mark. So that's the kind of first page entry point. But looking at ChatGPT for Mac, for example, you're looking at a 90, which is very far away from your 50, right? So what we want to look for is things that do have some signal in terms of volume and traffic, but they don't necessarily have a super high entry point to the first page, which that is what this means. While we're looking at this, I think this should also be here, a bug or an oversight. I'll tackle that later. But yeah, so we'll go in here, we look at the authority mark, and we'll look something in the ranges of 50 to 70 maybe. I think that is reasonable. I also found Dan in here. I'm not sure if that's Kolkov, but that would be kind of funny. And then we see ChatGPT for resumes, which is its own kind of use case, right? So we can maybe move that to its own topic so that we can explore it more. Same goes for ChatGPT for Gmail, which I think applies to your product as well, because it just sits on top, right, as a Mac app. That could be an interesting use case. I think this also needs to move to might still be in progress. It's not showing up here, but I'll move that later. Also teaching, right? That's another use case. Lawyers, that's another use case. So basically, teachers teaching, okay, ChatGPT for dummies, for Windows, for desktop. right, so now we're kind of getting into territory where it's probably too competitive for you at this stage. But I think real estate resumes, for example, and teaching, and also what I think it might be a good use case for you to look at, which has some value here, is templates. So basically giving people prompts that they can run to do certain use cases. With a use case, there probably come some templates you can create, giving users more value in terms of prompts. And it's also something that doesn't look super competitive. You'll probably have free ones because you're not really monetizing the templates. You just want to add extra value to your offering, right? So yeah, let's go in, and then when we're in here, we can add similar keywords, which will go in and add more things to this. So we'll use this topic as a kind of route to fetch similar keywords to this. And why we're doing this is because I think each of these, if we see them as an ecosystem, they will have other kind of content formats that we should be covering, right? So basically, let's look at ChatGPT for Gmail. We'll do this everywhere where we kind of expand it and put this into its own thing. Another bug. It's always good to use your own software. I think that might have been fetching 2 or more at the same time. But basically, we'll expand all these, and then we'll go in and we create topic clusters. I mean, these are clusters, right? So we will say like, okay, ChatGPT for Gmail, that's a use case, so that's a solutions page. But maybe now we have how to use ChatGPT for Gmail or something, right? Which would be a blog post. But it speaks to the same kind of ecosystem, which is like people want to have ChatGPT in Gmail, or they want ChatGPT for, as a developer, they want to use it, or they want it, for real estate listing creation or something like that, right? So I think some of these you need to check in terms of like where you see yourself kind of aligned in terms of strategy and kind of value proposition. So what is a certain market you actually want to go into? Not all of these will apply. I mean, lawyers, for example, is like, might be too risky, for example, right? But what you want to look for is kind of the authority that you need to go into the space. And then obviously within these, let's say, ChatGPT for Gmail, right? You have smart reply. Yeah, here's, for example, how to use ChatGPT for Gmail. And it has some signal. I mean, these are always like estimates, right? And then you have a entry point of 53. With your 51, that actually doesn't look too bad, right? So we could, for example, write this as a long form article, how to use ChatGPT for Gmail. And we could have this as a solutions page, which from this long form, you will create internal linking to this kind of solutions page. And then usually what you'll also have is something like best ChatGPT tools for Gmail or something, right? Where you have a kind of roundup here. This is a roundup. There doesn't seem to be much signal around that here, but maybe for the other ones that we looked at, resumes, okay, work history, GPT, I think we haven't expanded this yet. GPT templates. All right, and if you want to just add a new thing here to expand this further, you can do it like so, and I will go ahead and create a cluster here, and I will go in and fetch all these page opportunities underneath. GPT prompt. For example, here you have best ChatGPT prompt templates, right? Which also only has a 58. And if you want to look at kind of the pages themselves, you can just download this. Sorry, here, export, and see more information, like who is actually the entry point to the top 10. What is their rank? So this is, for example, the lowest DR, 89. This is the URL, and this is their rank. So they're actually ranking on 3, which is quite good, but I think it's also quite high DR. So it seems to be a very competitive keyword. But let's maybe look at the for Gmail stuff. So here we have ChatGPT for Gmail. Okay. So there's this is a 64, which is a support article, right? For it's probably some type of solution. Right? And here, for example, is an example where you actually have a tool that is built around this, right? Or maybe this is the kind of page I was talking about, right? You have a landing page. In this case, it's the home page, where you're just catering to a certain use case, for example, for Gmail, right? And then you lay out your solution in terms of like this for Mac, and like if you're a Mac user and you want to use Gmail, you can use my tool, right? That's kind of the point of it. The templates, again, sorting by authority. Okay, there's no real signal around this. It looks like ChatGPT templates. That's a 62. I mean, this is actually pretty decent. 62, not too competitive. GPT prompts. I mean, for you, right? It's always like context dependent, and the volume looks kind of not bad. But this is like, you know, how can you provide kind of value around your tool, and how can you cast a bit of a wider net, right? In order to templates. I think this sounds more like a roundup, maybe. It could be like best ChatGPT templates or something, right? Or you can just make a guide and say like, this is how you, no, a guide doesn't make sense. No, I'm thinking about it. All right. So I'll hand this over to you. The system also gives you some suggestions. Let's maybe refresh this because I think they're quite old. And those could be more seeds here as well, or more side topics. Yeah. Once you want to go in and you want to create a brief, what you can do is, let's see what it comes up with here. ChatGPT for Gmail as a solutions page. We'll create the brief, and we'll just take what the system gives us as keywords. So what we're doing now is we're going ahead and we're scraping the SERP, so the search engine results page, and we're looking at pages that rank for this term. What keywords do they use to rank, right? So basically we're not just using this keyword, but we're getting so-called secondary keywords. So keywords that should also be on the same page as this one, as we're seeing in the results on Google, right? All right, so now that we have this page, you will see probably the Chrome store ranking here, right? Interesting. So I guess it is somewhat competitive on the top, because I mean Google will have high DR, right? But I think if you can position your solution in a kind of as a solution for Gmail, how that would look like is basically in here, you have an outline that kind of, for this kind of page, which is not long form, it's a solutions page. We center more around like, you know, what can it do for GPT, for Gmail? What are the features? So what are your features positioned in a way that they're useful for people that use Gmail? And kind of the benefits, you know, insights to the benefits, why they should choose you, USP, some case studies, right? I mean, some of these maybe don't apply. I guess installation you actually have. But this is basically an outline for how to create a page that caters to users that want GPT, but they also want to use Gmail. They want to use a GPT within Gmail, right? And they will look similar across those other kind of verticals, but this makes it its own page rather than just being a section on your homepage, right? Which caters more to a specific use case. You can go in here and then copy this to Google Docs for now. We're working on an editor, and then you can either pass this off to a writer for solutions pages. It's probably better if you do it yourself, unless you want to, convey a lot of positioning information basically to the user. But I think that could be like a quick win, right? To create separate pages for these use cases that you already have anyway. Like you already thought about ChatGPT for developers and ChatGPT for marketers and ChatGPT for teachers, no students, I think. And then, giving that a bit more depth, and then maybe just creating a sort of how to use ChatGPT as a student or something, right? How to use ChatGPT as a developer. And then there you have something that you can just produce. I think it will be like 8 pages or something. And that you just let sit and see, if it actually produces results for you. But yeah, and it also gives you kind of the URL structure, right? So it's like solutions or use case or whatever you want to say, call it. And yeah, maybe that gives you some insight how you can use the tool. And happy to, answer any more questions, etc. Right? Cheers.